Oh, we're live. Okay. All right. Do you know what time it is? Showtime? No. It's Unity time is 12:40. Like I said, it may be 12:43, 12:45 at Unity time. 12:40. So we have, for those of you watching at home, we still have folks walking in. So take your time, everyone. You have 3 seconds to get seated. I'll do a quick bit of house cleaning. I don't have to stall too long. You're on stage. Quick bit of house cleaning is that we want to make this interactive. And if you are watching at home, we are monitoring the feed from Facebook, website, or app. And you can ask a question. And then that will get, through the technology gods, will somehow make its way down to the one and only Robert Edwards, sitting right down here in the second row. You can't miss him. He's got the great hair and beard. But he will ask the question for you at that part of the program. So don't hesitate to put almost any question under the sun out there. And I was just reminded that also at the end today, when we quit, you can. Today is free. We wanted to offer this for free today because we believe it's that important. But we always want to make the opportunity available to give a love offering. And you may do that in the donation station, which is right outside in the hallway. Or as always, you can do it through our website or our app, especially if you're watching at home. So thank you for that too. And I getting a question already. See, what I'm seeing is the shy people are not here today. So, yeah.
I'm your resident introvert. You would make the check out to Unity?
You would make the check out. Yeah, you would make the check out to Unity of Dallas. Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we give another, wasn't today great? Yes. Okay. And I gave you enough time to put your water down so that you can clap once again for, please welcome Dr. Dina and Reverend Gowan to the stage. And we even have a place for you to put your water over here if you want, right next to my Rowdy drink. It's called Rowdy.
Rowdy?
Yeah, it's this little thing at Unity that we haven't told you about that principle of rowdiness yet, that spiritual principle. I think it's called worship with a lot of gusto and energy and live life fully and sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm is what our 93-year-old co-founder called it. So if you're going to have a long day, that helps. All right, so I wanted to start today by, I mentioned something earlier in our exchange here about the idea of resilience, and we want to expand on that a little bit because if you think about it, human beings are very resilient. And we have walked through a lot this last year, but we've also walked through in the past catastrophic storms and nature and plagues and so many things. So we are a resilient species, and that is good, and we should be pretty proud of ourselves for that part of it. What do you guys think about that word?
One of the things that I think happens is we talk a lot in therapy about toggling from the present to the past to the present. And one of the things we can use is our life experience to look at some of the other things we've experienced in life and to recognize, yes, that was a difficult time, but we toggle forward to today and I'm okay with it today. And it's a not so subtle reminder that we're going to be okay regardless of what we're going through. When we get hit with these new things that are in our face, I don't think many of us expected COVID to work out the way it did, starting March through, the 2 weeks later into March when everybody's sitting at home. There's such an unexpected thing on the change that it's disorienting. And I think that the reorienting, that's where we step into the spirituality of the reorientation with what our roots come from and where we stand. That's one of the big assets or one of the big resources we have around this idea of resilience is that the disorientation moves us apart from. The reorientation and the reconnection with our Creator, our higher power, puts us back into a familiar place in spite of what's going on out there. And that, to me, is one of the great things that we get to use as a resource. And those of us that choose to engage this spiritual connection, I think it made it easier for us to connect in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Was there any other idea or concept that you may want to follow up on after our exchange earlier today before we do get into the Q&A? And with these mics, I do have to remind you to keep it really close. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Anything you can think of?
I'm thinking. Can I say a bit more about resilience?
Oh, I'd love it.
Yeah. How many of you feel resilient right now? Resilient. Yeah. How many of you have really reviewed your past year intentionally?
A self-assessment or a self-audit?
Yeah, so I really, like I said earlier, I really think that's a useful process. And just at the, really broad scope, right? We had those amazing images start coming in from Italy. If you remember, if you go back to March, it was very specific for me because two of my 3 kids were out of the country. And so the world started closing borders, and I started getting more anxious, and they started calling and saying they couldn't get flights, the flights were full, and so I had quite a bit of fear. And that's the way it started. And then we all met on stage with Dr. Casanova and Dr. Doolittle. You just can't make up those names in one sentence.
That's a true story. Dr. Doolittle, Casanova, it's still on our videos if you want to go back and watch. Right. Last March, early March. Yeah. And here we were, not knowing how much change was really what we were in for.
No idea. And, to your credit, he brought in, mental health people and the president of the Dallas County Medical Association, and then a nutritionist who was speaking directly to the immune system. Because remember, early on, we heard you've got to get your immune up, right? So we know that the immediate drop in your immune is fear, right? Fear and stress lowers the immune system. So trying to hold all of that and say, yeah, be happy, and people are dying and countries are closing was really a challenge. So you held an event where we had people talk about very, very specific, good medical information, which is what we needed. So that was March. Then we had, that kind of lessening, remember, in the summer, and we were like, oh, we can maybe start being a little bit more free. And then we had the vast variability of some governors said, yes, do this, some didn't. Then we had local leaders saying, no, you can't do this, yes, you can do this, and all of this confusion. We had the Floyd incident, that horrendous event that happened in our country. We had a
lot.
Change in presidency. We had trillions of dollars poured into the economy. So we had multiple things that we all had to deal with on a daily basis and deal with our own families and our own selves. So I think we're pretty resilient. We're all sitting here today, and it's pretty remarkable. So what makes us resilient is really a big question. And there's so much research on what makes children resilient. And as I was thinking about this going forward, what are some of the lessons we've learned? We have to move forward with more flexibility and less rigidity. We have to learn to bend with the wind, to move with the wind instead of stand rigid or in our strength, full strength, fighting the wind. We have to have more humility. We have to have less pride. Those are the kinds of things that come with resilience. And then optimism. That is the number one in all the research on resilience. Optimism comes up over and over and over. Wow. And I don't know how to be optimistic without a spiritual connection. I don't know how to make that happen.
And that's the thing, because we talk about these words you just mentioned and optimism, and on the cerebral level, we know, yes, we believe in that. We want that. But then kind of what we're talking about today is the fact that it's hard to step out and be vulnerable and even to be accountable for a lot of the things as how we're showing up. And we don't want to talk about it or maybe talk to anybody about it. And then what happens is our behaviors often will self-sabotage what we're trying to do in the world. We're sabotaging what's in our highest and best. If you've ever shown up to a conversation or a relationship or work or anything, let's talk about that for a quick second. These behaviors that you guys have seen happening in a situation like the pandemic and whatnot. Yeah. And what to do about it.
We had an 60% increase in alcohol use. And that was just self-report. So that wasn't even alcohol sales. That is people saying that they're using alcohol much, much more. We also had we had a 20% increase in overdoses. So people at home alone using substances and using a little bit extra, right? But using a little bit more because of the stress they were dealing with. We know that the use in porn went up 4 times. So all of these compulsive behaviors that humans reach for when we have nothing else to reach for, when we lack the internal, right? We talked about that earlier. In our Western world, we reach for outside to make the inside feel better. And we see that those are more than often the self-sabotaging.
Just to try to cope.
Yeah, and then of course anxiety and depression went up 4 times. So that's what stress does to us, what chronic stress does to us.
There was another thing that we saw fairly early on that I thought was fascinating, and it surprised me. It was heartening to see, but it surprised me. And as we had groups that continued, we moved automatically to Zoom because of the disc. We couldn't be in the same room, or we couldn't put that many together. And what we began to see was the folks that had some basis in mental health to start with, that had a spiritual connection, who were active in their own growth and recovery, they did far better with the pandemic coming on because they had a foundation to stand on. And that was true for folks who had a church connection, who had a therapy connection, had a group therapy connection, any kind of support system around church or 12-step, anything like that. Those folks typically were doing better because they had better resources. I used to work as a chaplain in the hospital for many years, and one of the things I learned there is it's almost impossible to teach new coping mechanisms in the midst of a crisis. You can help people reach and connect to their coping mechanisms, but you can't teach new ones in a crisis. And so when this hit, folks who had resources were able to grab them quicker, and the folks that were stepping in because they had the new crisis that came up for them, they were the ones that struggled and suffered more initially as they had to learn these new coping mechanisms, get to a new plateau or a new homeostasis, and then begin to deal with it. So the folks like here who have a community, that's a real resource that we don't often recognize, and I think that's one of the things that y'all did very well here at Unity, was staying connected with people. You transitioned almost immediately into the online stuff. You made the resources available to everybody quickly, and that's the type of thing that helps maintain and build the resilience.
Thank you. Yeah, it was quite a lot to do in a short period of time, and one of the things we're starting now, or I'm actually talking to, I don't know if Lauren Arnold's here, but also Lauren or Teresa Johnson. We're working to create a grief recovery group. Lauren has a license in it, a grief recovery group, because so many folks are grieving some type of loss. So let's get together, talk about it, and see if we can move through. We also have a caregiver support group, because caregivers are often taking care of others, but not themselves maybe as well. So we have that already. So we try to do that. we realize the value to it. And that is talking to someone and taking steps in a positive direction. So I do want to open it up for questions. And if you have a question and you are anywhere near the center or this side of the room, I want to have you go to that mic. Shall I tell them why? No, I'm not going to tell them why. Yeah, but if you're way over here, you can just step up to this mic. So you're close enough to this mic. Go ahead and get us started, Ann. You have something to tell us. Go ahead. Go ahead. You'll find there's always a method behind the madness, with me. I'll tell you what it is. No, this mic. I want you to go to that one. That one over there. I'll go ahead and tell you why. Jennifer has an angle of that mic so we can get you on camera. And KK wants to see you today.
Of course, he calls on me because I am never without something to say, right? So
Get y'all step up just a
I kind of joked with James, but seriously, as you all were wrapping up, I whispered to James and I said, I had 2.5 years of therapy and it saved my life. And I mean, I wasn't dying and I wasn't thinking suicide. I just kept floundering around and wallowing in, and I won't do the whole life story, but in a brief, alcoholic father, raised by grandparents, his parents, and he was back in our lives all the time. Ran away from home and got married when I was 15, And then my children's father was in an automobile accident and was permanently in a mental institution with brain damage. I had 2 little boys. So I could go on and on and on. The main reason I went through therapy is because my mother said to me, you need help because you marry everybody that asks you. And I said, then my sister needs to be involved because she's been married more times than I have, right? So, but I mean, seriously, I say bless you for what you do because it made such a huge difference in my life. And I think one of the things I hope you all will address is people's resistance to go get help. They're embarrassed, or they think people will think badly of me because I'm in therapy or I'm seeing a psychiatrist or whatever. Fortunately, I didn't have that. For one of the first things he said to me, one of the best things about you is you have zero fear. One of the worst things about you is you have zero fear. So I learned a lot, and I just say thank you for what you do.
Thanks so much, Ann.
Yeah, there's just shame around asking for help sometimes, and we hope to change that.
One of the ways I normalize that for my kids, now they've got a therapist as a father, but at one point my daughter, when she was 13, she and the kids at school were talking about what their parents did for a living, and my daughter came home and she said, now let me get this straight. People pay you for what you think. And I said, yes, they do. And she went, in her 13-year-old way, why would they come back? So I've always said that, our kids have dealt with our impact, not our intention, because my intention was always good with them. I think that the parents' responsibility is to pay for the education and their therapy because they had the misfortune of having their mother and I as a parent. And so that's the impact we've had on them. But to your point, I think that there is a changing perspective on the usefulness of therapy. And, I continue to see my therapist today because it's the fastest way I can continue to grow. And I let my clients know that. I can't promote something for them if we're not willing to do our own work. And that to me it's not the only avenue to growth, it's just one of the ones that I found to be most effective for me.
Yeah, I appreciate your story. My daughter is learning slightly. It's fun to watch her what it means to be a preacher's kid already at 3 years old. But I'm like, what about me, a preacher's kid's dad?
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. Robert?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say and follow up from Ann, thank you both for being here today. It was
Thanks, Robert.
very enlightening and educational, so thank you. So now we have a couple of questions from home. And first one, how do you counsel/help someone who refuses to acknowledge reality?
Ooh, well, let's just start with the simple stuff. Ooh, good one.
Go ahead.
This is a great rabbit trail. isn't it?
Just said
It's what
that
is
as-
reality.
was what my, yeah, exactly, exactly. So according to whom would be my question. And I think that if whoever is asking this question is obviously cares about this other person and wants them to engage in the therapeutic process for a purpose. And my guess is that purpose would be they're wanting to connect with them. You know, when we live in different realities, which all our couples do, that is not a deal breaker. It is a challenge of most intimate relationships. Well, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. I heard it. I'm going to record you. See, this is what I said. Well, I still don't hear what you're talking about. It doesn't matter what kind of data. It's just perception. So what I would say to that person is you obviously care about them. You obviously want to connect. There's a difference in the that's getting in the way. Daniel and I have a saying that's come out of COVID, which is our goal is to help you have differences without distance. We have seen this massive divide in our country where people articulate difference and the distance grows into huge gaps. So to engage them as we go together, not you need to go and get fixed and come back, but we will go together. That would be my response.
So as a follow-up to that, it's really, I guess I should have read the ... with it. Someone who is wrong but believes they are right.
Well,
Well, that never happens.
Yeah.
Never.
You know,
Never.
what I'd say to that is that something I said in the presentation earlier, respect is the minimum of love. And whether I agree with you or disagree with you, I can still maintain a level of respect for you. And if we create that, then we do what we can to create the ground that we can begin to have this discussion on of, I don't see it your way. You know, if we look at what the objective is in an engagement or a conversation, the objective for success is not defined as you believe what I believe. The objective, I believe, is to understand what you believe and to give you the opportunity to understand what I believe. That, to me, is success, not that we have to agree. And when we can make that space sacred between us, to be able, Dina and I don't agree on stuff, and yet we have the commitment to our business relationship that we can talk it through and even honor the differences that we have with each other. That's at a fundamental level about the values we're going to choose for the relationship of, do I value this relationship enough to allow you to be different? See, there's an arrogance even in the way I say that, right? Because I see the world through my eyes, and I will allow you, if I can make space that it's okay for you to be different and it's okay for me to be different, we have a safety in the relationship where we can talk differently. And I like Dina's point earlier, let's both of us go find a neutral place, perhaps with a third party, that we can talk through this and begin to engage the principles in a different way.
I hope that if any of you watching this, which the answer is probably all of us, have a concern about this or run up against this, that what if this person isn't seeing reality? What if they don't want to be in reality or they're not listening to the facts? I know that's tough. I'm a facts-based person. I really like to research, a lot of research. But what I heard you say, so my invitation was to go back and watch this video, just this answer they gave. Because we need a constant reminder, a constant reminder. I'm a minister, I need a constant reminder. What I say, my mantra is, get back to principle.
Yeah.
And what were the
Exactly.
principles you
Yeah.
just heard? The first thing Dr. Dina said is, well, if somebody's bringing that to you, even if it's in a conflict, they care. They care. They probably care a lot. So that means something. So then we get into what Reverend Daniel just said about values. And look at all the values he just spoke of. You know, the principle, that's principle, the love, the compassion, the empathy. If I can get back to principle and start with that and just breathe, then amazing things can happen. But when I start showing the person a recording of what they really said, it doesn't really work, you know. So that's powerful stuff. And it's the path we're on, guys. Yeah, because this is a polarized world, isn't it? Polarized country.
Yeah.
So whoever asked that question, thank you, because you did. Hey, Thumbs up. Good.
Thank you.
Good question. Woo. Next question. If you have a question, you might go ahead and get to the mic. Yeah, go ahead and get to the mic if you have a question.
Yeah, I do.
Step close to it so they can hear you at home.
I appreciate all what you said today. And you talked about getting therapy. You know, I told you my brother was mentally ill, but he refused to go get therapy. And I just couldn't believe it.
Can you get a little closer to the mic? I can't hear you yet.
My brother, is that better? My brother
Yeah.
was mentally ill. I had to support him many years because he never could keep a job. And he refused to go get therapy. And I never understood why he wouldn't do it, but he wouldn't. So I did support him, and I was there for him. And of course, the big thing is you had to learn to forgive. And that's what I had to do. And when I went to see him, I visited him a month before he passed away, and I wrote him a celebration of life. He said, Ann, you didn't put all that bad stuff that I did. And I said, Hal, we're all humans. We all do good and not so good things. The important thing is we learn from it and not keep making the same mistakes. He said, oh, that's good. I'm going to share one more thing with you for your daughter. I love what my son does. My son just got his 17th patent passed for helping the environment, which is wonderful. My daughter retired from UT Southwest as a PhD, so she could be a stay-at-home mom. But I love what my son does. When their daughters, or when their kids turn 3, they had to do chores. They get quarters for banking, saving, spending, and helping other people. It teaches them that money doesn't grow on trees. Of course, grandmother helps them with quarters. But I've learned, like I say, when I pray now, I've just learned to say, God, be with, because God knows the best way to help that person. And that's just why now I say, be with.
Yes.
But thank you for being here. You had such a really beautiful
Thank you.
Thank you.
advice.
Thank you. You know, one of the things you bring up that I think is hugely useful is when Dina and I talk to parents about how we're supposed to engage our children, there's 3 primary tasks, and I think you were talking about that at that level, is to affirm, nurture the child, and set appropriate limits. To affirm, nurture, and set limits. And I think that's true from God's treatment for us. How we're called to engage each other is to affirm, nurture, and set appropriate limits. Setting boundaries or setting limits are loving actions, and that's how we learn to live with each other. That's how we learn to relate at its best level with each other, is through the affirmation and the nurturing of each other. I think that's what we are called to do from a spiritual base, and I think it's the most practical way to move forward and to honor the humanness and see the speck of the divine in other people. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Louise Ross has a question for us. 2 questions.
First of all, thank you for being here. This is touching and relevant. So 2 things came to my mind. One was when you mentioned resilience with circumstances, and one has to do with spirituality. So which one should I ask first? Resilience, okay. Well, what touched me is my own experience, of course, working on childhood wounding and trauma. And the truth is resilience. You mentioned we need to be resilient, not stiff, but pliant and flexible, I think is what I heard. And what came to me, you wouldn't hear this from me a year ago because I never did it. Yoga. There's something about yoga that was helping me within being resilient, breathing, moving, aligning, etc. So thank you for that with the idea of being resilient when things are tumultuous and scary. And the other thing, which is very touching to me, is spiritual. At some deep times, I was thinking, deep, meaning dark for me, I was thinking there's too much for me to learn. And what I would hear is, there is part of you, you are wired, there is part of you that already knows. And I take that as spirit with a capital S. And I wonder if you'd like to dig into that a little deeper, either the spiritual part or the resilience, because both of those, to me, are fireworks. They're just wonderful.
Just really ties into our principles that, that God is all. And I love your enthusiasm as you're describing both of those because they're both very real for you. And I think that that's a big part of why we're here is to remove any obstacles that may be in our way, which is what these guys are so helpful with because I know congregants who have come to me and said that. But to remove being self-awareness, what are the obstacles in my way where I'm not feeling as resilient as maybe I should, or I'm not feeling as spiritual as I should around something. So that's why this practice and this, we believe, leaning into the mental health. It's our third principle, co-creating, right? Co-creating our reality. So, but you're what I got. I love the way you said it, just because of your enthusiasm around it. I always appreciate you're such a light around it. Yeah. So, but we exude that off of each other. It's the important thing. Yeah.
And I think the body, you were talking about the yoga, the body pulls, it pulls that together. I mean, when I grew up, I did this misunderstanding that spirit was somehow out there and away from me and detached from me. And as I've gotten closer to understanding what's going on internally with me, I can now make that connection of the feelings that come up within me. And yoga, to me, any physical activity, walking, any physical activity is going to help pull those two together, the connection between the physical and the spiritual.
We actually had a new couple here today with 5 or 6, 5 kids, I think, children. It was awesome. But they used to have a yoga business, and they were like, oh, you're able to discuss yoga and Christianity together and the linkage, and they were as fired up as you, about that, about understanding that path. So, but if I'm doing yoga, sometimes something pops up for me that I need to explore in my own spiritual path, and that's where I get to dive into what we're talking about and be more resilient. So.
I love that you brought those up together too, because to me, we have to talk about those two in the same breath, that they go together. I think resilience is, and you all can just experience this, that resilience is when we feel spacious. Connection to God is when we feel spacious. There's an opening. It feels like there's an opening in our heart. There might be an experience of opening in the mind. And so we think about the principles of yoga, and it's based on opening, right? If your mind is constricted with fear or anger or envy or resentment, the body cannot open. The body cannot open. And so what happens to your yoga practice? Usually fall over. Well, I do.
Constricted, yeah.
Yeah, because the body just can't seek that place of balance that comes from the spaciousness. So, meditating and praying together creates that stillness that then allows for flexibility, then allows for the reconnection with, you and I call this the divine child, the divine self. It's the way we enter this planet, which is flexible, which is spontaneous, which is optimistic, right? Which is desiring connection. And we have to return to that. And the only vehicle that I know is quiet. Connecting with others, making space for stillness.
Yeah, earlier you said quiet meditation and movement. Mm-hmm. So I like that analogy. We did a series on the yoga of Jesus at one time. And nice. If you're locked in fear, it could end up just falling over, right?
Yeah. Okay. One more.
Yeah, real quick, because I want to make sure we get to everybody.
One more quick thing, man.
Yeah, just quick.
I used to work with children in the public school. I had 38 children that lived on the autism spectrum. I said, you're not autistic, you're a person with. And I always would come goals. God gave me the gift of creativity, and I'd come up with different ideas for their goals. And I said, you pick the ones that are best for you. Oh, I never thought about that, Miss Matthews. I'm going to do this and that. That's great. And I met one of my mothers a year or so ago. She said, Ann, thank you. Everything that you did helped Callie do wonderful. She's going to high school. Thank you for being there for her. But it's not, it's using whatever gifts we have for the good of all. And I tell them, you're not a person, like I said, you're not autistic, you're a person with it. We all have something. We all have new things that we have to learn every day. And that's what it's about, like you say. Just you learn from your mistakes, but you keep moving on. So, but thank you again.
Thank you.
I want to thank you both for addressing the area of mental illness and mental health issues. Something near and dear to my heart. I've been in the field over 30 years. But I wanted you to address the area of adding more mental health counselors in the public schools, as well as I understand some school systems have kids meditating. And would you address those two issues, meditation in the public schools?
So one thing I'll just mention before we get started, I'm going to defer to Dr. Hijazi because that was her job prior to going into private practice or in tandem with it. Give them a little bit of your history.
I worked with the Dallas Independent School District and worked first as a consultant where I met with them on the most difficult cases of children in special education. So often parents are the only advocates for these kids, as you all know, and there's a lot of energy, a lot of emotion, a lot of fear. So I did that. Then I worked with them in the capacity of in their psychological services department. And what I helped to do, along with some other people, is to bring a APA-approved internship to the department, so that we were getting really top-notch PhD students coming in for their pre-doc internship to work with kids who have mental illness. So the Dallas Independent School District, with all its problems, is way at the forefront of putting mental health in the public schools. We also started, which I was a part of that I absolutely loved, we started a meditation for preschool and kindergarten, and it was just precious to have these children, these little bitty ones, get quiet and get still. And the person that was doing it, one of the teachers whose classroom I was in, loved it. And so she started really teaching them to greet with namaste. And so you see these little kids walking around the hallways doing this to each other, and it was the most precious thing. But it really changed the culture, of that school. It really slows things down. And we're in such a fast-paced culture in Dallas, so anything that we can do starting from our children, I think, is really useful. I had the privilege of working with DISD. We had high school kids and middle school kids that were being sex trafficked, and so part of what I did was put in a program to identify them, and we were able to do that, and we had a great team. We were actually able to move the court out of the courthouse into a separate place where these kids could come and press charges against their pimps and press charges against the people that were doing this to them, where they didn't have to face the adult court system. So there's a lot of good that's being done, and we have other school districts that I won't mention in the suburbs that we don't have mental illness. And if you have a kid with mental illness, you go outside the school. So I think it's a lot of us just being outspoken about it. You agree?
Educators I've talked to have talked about how they don't call it meditation in their schools because they don't want to sound religious. But they'll use another word. But everyone I've talked to is so excited that they're getting to offer this to children. And Ray, I know you can imagine a world like we can, where the majority of kids are learning this at a young age, and the amount of change there would be in the world if kids started at that age learning the value of it. So I do want to go to home question.
Home question.
Yeah?
Home question. What is the first step you take when accepting that you can't change someone and their beliefs that cause you to have to walk away? Would you like me to repeat that, sir?
Yes, please.
One more time.
What is the first step you take when accepting that you can't change someone and their beliefs that cause you to have to walk away?
I guess what occurs to me as I think about that is I have to look at why I was vested in the outcome I was shooting for. And it pulls it back to me not wanting somebody else to be different.
Could you say that again?
I don't know if I can. I have to look at why I'm vested in wanting them to be different. You know, I've placed my success on this and somebody else being different, and I've got to look at what I've got an investment in over there. Now, it may be that I truly believe that what I want for them is best, but I'm going into their hula hoop to tell them how to be different. I think one of the principles we teach is we have no right to expect somebody to be any different than they are. And this is hard to get to. We have no right to expect somebody to be any different than they are unless they're violating our boundary. Then we have a vested interest in saying, no, you can come to this place, but no closer. And that may be why they're talking about the disengagement. If there's boundary violation, I think there's a different circumstance that comes in where I'm allowed to protect me, but I've got to give up this idea that you have to be different for this to be an okay relationship, or you have to be different to satisfy me, because we have no right to expect somebody to be any different than they are.
And another principle at D2 counseling is we allow other people the dignity of their own journey. That it is not up to us, and we don't have the right to step into, and we say it like this, we don't have the right to step into the God position and dictate to another person how they should be doing their life. That we have to give them the dignity to do their own journey.
Even when we disagree with it, even when we think it's going to bring them harm, I knew far better what my children should be doing with their lives than they sometimes did. But I had to learn to take a step back and move myself out of that God position to allow them the freedom to walk forward. Now that's a minor example, and there's serious situations out there, but that is the principle we have to go back to.
After today, some of you may be inspired to talk to a professional counselor. You may even talk to D2 counseling. And then all of a sudden, good counselors, which they are, make you bump up against your stuff. And will ask you questions like, why do you need them to be different in this situation? And then it's like, well, this isn't fun. I sure did like y'all at Unity. I don't like you so much anymore. That's too hard. But that's taking accountability. And that's what makes it hard for people to sometimes want to go talk to somebody, to take accountability. It's tough. Yeah, and be vulnerable. Tony.
So I wanted to follow up on some of the questions here in terms of why you're invested in having an outcome. And I'm thinking in terms of what we talked about with COVID, where people can be in denial. Mm-hmm. So you can have a legitimate interest in wanting them to get a vaccine or medical care, and they may have fear, or they may be watching things where they don't believe that's necessary. So it's not always a case of wanting to be right. It's a case of you truly believe that you have knowledge that you should share. Mm-hmm. So it gets back to that question of when do you push that and when do you shut up and just leave it? And that's a difficult thing for me to know.
Right.
Because if you're doing something because it breaks your heart, you don't want to see that go wrong, but you can't get that message received, that's a difficult thing. So.
It's a great question because so many families are separating because of what you just described. So,
hard question.
Yeah, I've got, I had to go to Las Vegas in the midst of the pandemic, not to gamble, but to get some medical stuff that I had to pick up a brace that was there and be fitted for it for my leg. And what I noticed, Las Vegas was completely shut down, and I'd get in the Uber to go over to the office and casually would ask, how is COVID going here? And everybody that I talked to was saying, well, they'd tell me what was going on, and then I'd bring up about the vaccine. And they would say, well, I'm not going to do this. What do you think? And that gave me the opportunity to simply outline what I believed. And I did it in a way that was non-judgmental. I did it in a way that was not condemning of somebody that thinks differently than me. And what happened in every circumstance is every one of them said, I'm going to rethink what I've made a decision about. And to me, that is the, here's who I am, and you're allowed to bump up against me to see if that matches with you. And I don't know if any of those people made the same choice that I did, but it gave them the freedom, because I allowed it to be done in a respectful way, for them to bump up against me and see if that fit for them. I'll tell you what, one of the things that we tell our couples is if you start the sentence with the word you or why, you're going to bring on a fight. And so when I can come back to me and just explain to you who I am, it gives you the opportunity to see who you might be in that relationship. But then I give up the need for you to be just like me.
It's such a really good question. I appreciate that, because this is what we've been living essentially. And this great phrase that's come out this year, decision fatigue is just, I mean, it's so fitting, because in every moment we're going, do I lean in? Do I lean out? Do I get angry and tell them they're doing it wrong, or they should be doing it this way, and give them statistics and data, and, what do I do? So, again, like this congregation believes that when we get into a bind, go to principles that keep your feet tethered to the ground. Go to principles which are your values, right? Which is your value system. And what comes to the top of the value system, at times it might be that I stay in relationship with you. At other times it might be my medical, my physical health. So if it's my physical health, what am I in control of? Has to be the next question, because I cannot make the world safe for me. I cannot do that. If I am invited into a conversation about the vaccine, I will say with as much respect as I can, this is what's right for me. And then I delineate, like Daniel said. But for me to choose to go, you've got to do it this way, because it's my belief. We've gone back and forth in our office how many times? I mean, it is a constant moving target. We like to have everybody wear masks, and then the CDC changes it. Okay, only mask if you're vaccinated. And then people are coming in that are unvaccinated, that don't have masks. And so it's this constant, how do we honor everybody and keep the most safety we can? So I think at an individual level, we have to ask ourselves that every day. If you're around people not vaccinated, make a choice to not be around those people for now.
And I want to give everybody a chance to share. Do you mind coming back to it? Because I want to finish up on the, if you don't mind just letting everybody share first. But I would say, too, it's so important to listen. So often somebody just wants to be heard. Just listen. Then keeping all of that in mind and being able to just put the need to be right on the shelf, or the need, because we love that person, so we really want them to know, but if we can just listen, and also the Socratic, right? Just asking questions, and sometimes you meet in the middle faster than you would have expected if we give the knee-jerk, yeah, but da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's a practice. It's a daily walk. Go ahead, Julia. Right, Julia? First timer to Unity, guys. So. She's been in Dallas 3 weeks, and here you are at the mic.
Yes. And I'm going to ask a question.
Yeah.
So my question is, with everything that we're saying, how do you deal with people that are not coming from a place of love and unity, because I feel like in spaces like this, it's so much easier to understand each other because we're all coming from love and acceptance and unity and all of those values. But throughout this last year, I think not only I've seen, but I think we've all experienced people who are coming from anger and judgment and hatred. So how do you deal with that the best way that we can?
It's tough. It gets in the stomach, doesn't it? It's just icky. Yeah.
We get plenty of practice with this, I think. We really do, because then we run up against folks who are very dogmatic in how they think we should be. And what Dina and I talk about a lot is the use of boundaries, and we use we've done presentations here in the lecture series that Unity co-hosts with us, of the Dallas Free Lecture Series. And in that, we use hula hoops to demonstrate where the boundaries are between the two of us. And I think that's a good question that brings that to mind, is they want to come out of their hula hoop to tell me how to be different. And when they do it in a dogmatic or even offensive way, I do have the boundary that I get to say, that's far enough. And we can do that in many ways, with boundaries and consequences and natural consequence that comes with a boundary violation. My mentor once said to me that she can always meet people with a wall of polite. And I really like that because it keeps me connected at some level with a wall of polite. I don't have to go deep into the relationship. I don't have to go deep into the conversation, but I can imagine this wall of polite that I'm engaging you with. And it does that in a respectful way. I get to show up and be present in the relationship. Now, if they pull out a knife and want to stab me, I'm going to take a step back, and we're not going to be as polite, but I can still back away to keep myself safe. We are never called to make ourselves vulnerable in a dangerous way. Vulnerability is fine, but we don't have to put ourselves in an unsafe position with somebody else. And that's where we use the boundary, and the boundary gets firmer and firmer and firmer as we need to. But that's where I start, is with this wall of polite.
So that would be on one end of the continuum as a wall of polite, and then on another end of the continuum, which I will try to do in certain situations, is another value and spiritual principle that I hold as my truth is, if I hold space for tension, that allows spiritual transformation of that energy. So if I can practice holding the space of the anger, the fear, the anxiety, the hopelessness, that is the process of alchemy, right? That is the opportunity that the spirit can enter and transform that space between me and this other person. So standing in that fire is what it feels like. And I have clients, but mostly I have people in my larger community that will insist that this is the right way, will insist that this is, vaccines aren't the way to do it, to use your example, but it comes in many forms with COVID. It was mask, right? So to stand in that and to try to hold a loving presence, I believe I'm affecting some sort of change. That might be delusional, but I like to believe that, and I choose to believe that, and I have experienced that to be transformative. So that would be another option.
And it's spiritual and emotional maturity to be able to just look at that person anyway and to see that they too have the Christ within them, and to breathe and just have a lessening around it. Unity calls it discernment, which may be a little knowledge and some intuition with it, but we discern that maybe it's time to not allow this person to take our power away anymore. So we can lovingly let them go, or say no, or step away and create the boundaries that Reverend Daniel was talking about. And it's hard, but it's really not honest to do anything other than that. If we know this repeated behavior, or if it's abusive or whatever, we're not really doing them a favor or ourselves a favor to stay in a dishonest place of not expressing our truth and our power and who we're here to be. So hope that helps. Yeah.
Well said.
James, I've got two questions. One is COVID related and one is substance abuse related. So since we're on COVID, may I go ahead and ask that one first? In several circumstances that I have personally run into people who feel guilty about doing well during COVID, thriving. Several examples, and I'm not going to share them. I don't want to give any distrust, but people feeling guilty because they did all right during COVID. So how does one try to respond to a question like that and help diffuse their guilt?
Yeah, they're often talking under their breath. My business actually did really well, but I don't know if I should say that or not. So, yeah.
Well, and our business did do well. Our business did do well because the elevated level of anxiety, and I've had that very thought, Robert. It's been difficult to watch the level of pain and suffering in this world. If you care at all about God's creation, to see the suffering and the pain that occurs at any time and then throw COVID on top of it, it's very hard for any of us that have some level of compassion. At the same time, what I try to do specifically to answer your question is move to a place of gratitude for what I have. Viktor Frankl said the last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude. In spite of all else going on around us, the thing that we do have the capability of is to choose the attitude that we want to embrace life with. For me, that's one of gratitude and appreciation of the relationship I have with my Creator and all of the things that I've drawn that are in my life that I can look at and be grateful for, including the circumstance I find myself in. I do not believe that my gratitude is at odds with my compassion for other people. I believe that they are complementary, and so that's the place that I have to move to, and not in a way that I feel better than, but rather just to be grateful for that, and I need to maintain my compassion for whatever else is going on around me.
Okay. All right. The other question is, do you agree with the statement, alcohol is 3 different drugs depending on how much you drink? If yes or no, please elaborate from an addiction expert's perspective.
Could you repeat it, please?
Yes. Do you agree with the statement, alcohol is 3 different drugs depending on how much you drink? If yes or no, please elaborate from an addiction expert's perspective.
I've never heard that before, so I'm a little confused by that. What I would say is alcohol acts differently in different bodies. So if that's useful or helpful, I hope that is. Our enzyme makeup, which is a genetically based phenomenon. Some people have these enzymes, some people don't. Some people have these, and our genetic mutations that exist when we come in at birth. All of those have an impact on how any substance gets metabolized in our system.
And for some, it seems more destructive than others based on that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things I'd say is that people drink to change the way they feel. They can proclaim they like the taste and all of that, but so iced tea and water is fine too. People drink to change the way they feel, and I think the difference is that I heard in that statement is the difference is how deeply people want to change the way they feel. And there becomes, if people move to that level of dependence, where they have to depend on the alcohol to change the way they feel in a certain way for a period of time, then I think it becomes an issue that bears looking at deeper than that. Addiction is one of those, we call it almost a distraction from reality, but addiction or alcoholism, when people go that direction, and they're trying to do this examination of, do I drink too much? The first question I ask them is it causing a problem in any area of your life? And if the answer is yes to that, and they're not in complete denial that the last 4 DWIs were not really a function of their drinking, if they can answer yes to that, then that's the place we begin, and we start in with a discussion about what it would look like to not have it impact their lives, and we can go whatever direction we need to at that point.
I think the question might be a way to get distracted. so that if there is a person in your life that is responding in a way that is destructive to either self or other, then to get distracted into the chemical bonding and chemical makeup of the molecular structure, I think is kind of a rabbit trail. More importantly is, have you tried to stop? Have you been unsuccessful stopping? Have you had consequences when using? And has anybody else around you say you shouldn't drink? And if that's the case, then you're probably stepping into a dependency, if not addiction, and that needs to be addressed, and probably you need to get some help from a professional.
So we started at 12:40. We've gone an hour, but do we have time for one more? Yes. And also, will you guys hang out a little longer so that any of you that still have questions, please come up and talk. So since you're at the mic, we're going to get your question. And then also, Carla, you had a question when I was walking in this morning. You thought I forgot. I was walking by you guys. I heard you asking, but I had to drag them away. So we could cover that one too, and I understand if anybody has to leave, you can do that. But then we'll do these two, and then closing remark, and then we will close up. Yeah.
Would you briefly address the suicide rate and the fact that it's on the rise?
Sure. I did a deeper dive into that because I have read a lot of data that says that suicide has gone down. So I'm glad to hear that you're not reading that, because as I went into a deeper dive, that is not true. It is on the rise, but only in the Black community. So what we see is an overall decline in just the numbers, right? Because the suicide in white people has decreased. However, the suicide in the Black community has gone up. That's not being put out there. I'd love to hear what you read. I think based on the illumination of the racial issues, and I also think that there's an awareness that public health is political and racial and not about the individual, and there are some pretty vast differences in ethnic medical care based on ethnicity.
And I think it leads to a higher sense of desperation with all of those things that COVID has done a great job of punctuating how different things are between different communities. I'd like to think that we're learning from this. We'll see.
One factor has to be hopelessness.
That's what I mean about the
Yeah,
despair.
hopelessness, yeah. Real quick, Joe? Yep, thank you, guys. That's a tough one. We could spend the whole afternoon about, and maybe we'll get to do that sometime. Just the issue of suicide is such a big one.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to thank you all for being here. It's a very honorable way to be, your profession. And I'm glad that there are people like you out there trying to help other people. And it's very difficult, but I just want to say that I'm happy that you're here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Reverend, for having him here. And I'll get in touch with you one day. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This guy, we put him through a lot of, worked off a lot of sweat last week, helping us with the picnic.
Thank you.
Final question for now.
Okay, well, this is a question that we were talking about earlier, and my question is this. We are seeing an explosion of different assignments of sexuality. It used to be just straight and gay, and now it's the LGBTQ and pansexual and all these other things that are going on. And I see that if I had young high school kids at home, how do I explain this to them? How do I even make sense of it as an adult? Of what do you see of this explosion of different, where we're differentiating ourselves even more from each other in this area?
So is your question how we would approach youth?
How do you know? How we know somebody that is a young person, and what is the healthiest way to interact with people that are exploring this variety of sexuality?
Do you want me to start? Just real quick, one thing I will say is being you. Carla Edwards, and so many of you that express yourself, you model the answer to your question because you are love. You show up with people with the mindset that you are no different than me. I may not understand all of your choices, but I see you, and I love you. And they feel seen. They feel seen, they feel heard, and that gets them excited. And we never know what a smile to someone who feels like they're an outsider means. Or making sure they know that we see them and that we heard them. And to be able to acknowledge to them, this is complicated. You know, we're in a complicated, layered society, and I don't blame you for having questions of me about that today. But at the end of the day, we have to model these principles. We have to model who we are and not just recite them from a book somewhere. You know.
Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Being a minister, I do get to say closing comment since I'm the moderator. I do get to wrap up here. But this has been very special today. Would you guys like us to have more of this in the future? Is this beneficial to you? Because, you know, I want to, we want to meet you and help. We're all in the boat together. For me to sum up my takeaway today is it's hard to be a human with this polarity. I just don't like it. And I've seen so much of it over the past however many years, really, but especially, you know, it's come out, it's accentuated in different ways this past year and a half. And, you know, we have a loving, beautiful community at Unity of Dallas, but everybody has their own challenges. And so even in our community, we've had people who say, and even friends of mine and people I know really well, they'll say, I can't believe that you're making people wear a mask. Then you have people over here saying, I can't believe that you're not wearing masks all the time. I can't believe you believe in that vaccine stuff. I can't believe that you don't make sure everybody is vaccinated. So it puts all of us in this, especially leadership and the board and you and our chaplain, everybody in this strange tug of war. So we don't know all the answers. We can acknowledge it's complicated, like we were just saying. But I believe that if we consistently stay who we are, if we consistently do the work, the unity principles, the prayer, the meditation, we continue getting to have discussions like this in a safe space, then we're putting one foot in front of the other. We're making movement forward. We're helping lift each other up, and we will get there. Because we don't know the big divine reason for all of it. We're not meant to understand all of it, right? But we just keep moving forward and be inspired. And if that doesn't work, we'll have Chase sing for us every day until we'll have Chase keep saying it, to be lifting up. But we're in it together, so let's continue moving forward. And thank you so much to all of you watching today and being with us today, and we'll hang around longer. And never hesitate to reach out. Never hesitate to ask for help. We love you. God bless you.